Reading with your kids.
Hey, so great to see you. Come on in. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are thrilled that you're part of our beautiful Reading with Your Kids family. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you find your podcast. Our guest today is author and school librarian Jolene Gutierrez. Before Jolene joins us, I want to invite you to visit my website, WeWillRoar.com. That's where you're going to find out about my educational magic show, We Will Roar. Respect others and read. Now, I know a lot of people out there are thinking, dude, you magic shows, they're not happening. Kids can't get together in crowds. A lot of kids aren't going to school. They're still at home learning virtually. I understand that. That's why we transformed We Will Roar into a totally interactive experience that is available virtually. That's right, online. It can come to your classrooms. It can come to your kids' home classrooms via technology. And I've been amazed at how much fun it is. It's fun for the kids. It's fun for me. It really is totally interactive. And we would love to visit your community this coming school year to bring some smiles to kids' faces during this really difficult time, and also to encourage them to always remember to respect everybody in their lives and to make sure that they read every single day. And not only just read, but read aloud and read virtually and vibrantly to visualize what they're reading. Check it all out. Go to my website, WeWillRoar.com. Joining us right now from the great state of Colorado, she is the author of 2 great new books, Mac and Cheese and the Personal Space Invader, and also Bionic Beast. Please welcome to the show, Jolene Gutierrez. Jolene, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I am great. I am really, really excited. I'm excited to talk to you about, I was mentioning to Jolene before the show, we recently had Jennifer Swanson, our Dean of all things STEM and STEAM, here on the show talking about her book, Beastly Bionics. But Bionic Beast is something completely different. So why don't we start there? Why don't we start with Bionic Beast?
Yes. So Bionic Beasts is a middle grade nonfiction book about 5 different animals who have been helped through science with different prosthetic flippers, beaks, and legs.
That's really cool. It's amazing what science can do.
Absolutely. Yes. These animals were in danger. Some most likely would have died without scientists and students and people intervening to help save them.
And we're talking about responsible interventions. We're not talking about putting a flipper on a dog or a beak on a whale or anything like that, right?
No, absolutely. These are very responsible interventions appropriate to the animals, and each animal's prosthetic limb was designed specifically for that animal.
Fascinating. I'm curious. It's a great thing that scientists will go out and take the time and the expense and the money to figure out how to do this, how to build a flipper and then attach it and make it functional. But I'm wondering, is it just a situation where scientists want to help this particular animal, or do they want to prove that they can do it, or is there something more? Is this like the first step towards something else?
You know, it's a little of both. The people who are involved in helping these animals absolutely want to help that individual animal have a better quality of life, but things better prostheses for future animals. And then many of these surgeons and veterinarians and people who create the orthoses, are using this information to better help humans as well.
Yeah, that's what I thought, because we talk about Augie the doggy here in the studio, and he's great, and he handles security here in the studio. but Augie's a doggy, and when it comes to medicine with our limited resources, we'll sell the house for my beautiful wife or one of the kids, but not so much for Augie.
Absolutely, yeah. And there are people involved in these stories. Cassidy is one of the dogs that was helped. His family probably would have sold the house for him, but the veterinarian who helped him was doing this osseointegration where he implanted a prosthetic device into Cassidy the dog's bone, and he was learning more about how that can later be used with humans. Wow. And it is currently being used with humans.
That's fascinating. How did you become interested in this?
Well, I have always loved animals. This is a little bit of a sad story, but I grew up on a farm. And on my farm, animals that couldn't be helped were often, there was just nothing that could be done for them. And so they suffered, and some even died. And so knowing that there are people out there who are going to these lengths, spending this amount of money and using their education to help animals and change animals' lives and better science for everyone was really inspiring to me, and I wanted to know more about these animals and these people involved in helping the animals.
Now, we heard a little bit about Cassidy and what they did for Cassidy. What's the most unusual situation that you encountered in writing this book?
Oh, that's a great question. So I would say Moshe the elephant. So in Thailand, there is the first elephant animal hospital in the world, Friends of the Asian Elephant Hospital, and it's run by a very inspiring woman, Sarita Salwala. She has been helping elephants for years, and she helps some elephants who have stepped on landmines and lost parts of their legs. So there are different doctors who have been involved in creating prosthetic legs for these elephants, and Moshe and Motala are two of the elephants that Sarita and her team have helped, which to me is just, the kinds of the steel and the rubber and the big, huge prosthetic devices they've had to build for these elephants, and much of it is trial and error because the people involved have made prosthetic limbs for humans, but to make the first prosthetic device for an elephant is just totally uncharted territory.
Yeah, and I know people have seen elephants on TVs and in movies, and maybe from a distance at a zoo or perhaps at a circus. I've seen elephants up close. I've seen elephants work. I saw an elephant pull a truck out of mud. The tow trucks couldn't get this vehicle out. They brought the elephant over. The elephant brought the vehicle out of the mud. And elephants are so big, and they are so incredibly strong. And again, I'm just, imagining what kind of technology must have gone in to create that prosthetic. It's just, it's mind-boggling to me.
Yes, it's fascinating. And like I said, it was a lot of trial and error, many different devices. And the youngest elephant, Moshe, the one I wrote primarily about, needed a new prosthetic device about every 6 months because she was outgrowing each device. So that's another thing to consider is, how many devices these animals will need over the course of their lifetime, and then the cost of these prosthetic limbs.
Yeah. Well, since you brought it up, any idea what a prosthetic elephant limb would cost?
I honestly have to say I am not sure. Okay. I didn't find that information in my research, but I would imagine it's a lot of money. I know that Friends of the Asian Elephant Hospital, they have a lot of generous donors. They always need more because elephants eat a lot. They need, this kind of medical attention. So, yeah.
Yeah, fascinating. I And I'm imagining, too, this would be a really fun book for, I know you wrote it for middle graders and, kids who are typically reading books on their own, but I'm imagining this would be a great fun co-read with parents and kids, because I'm sure there are a lot of parents out there like myself who had no idea that this kind of research is going on.
Yeah, I hope so. As I was researching and learning more about each of these animals, there were so many wow and aha moments for me. It was fascinating. It was so much fun to learn these things. So, and it is written at a little bit of a higher level, because there are a lot of scientific terms and, engineering types of ideas. So I think it would be great to sit with kids and read this and kind of unpack what's going on. There are also activities at the end of each chapter, so kids can do a little bit of hands-on experimentation.
Yeah. One of the greatest benefits I think that I got from reading with my kids as they got older, or watching films with them, or experiencing movies with them, was the fact that after that happened, then they would come to me with, hey, we read about that last week. Look at this. Look at what I found. And then I was able to go to them. And it just was a great way to kick off this culture of sharing information within our family that was just beautiful.
I love that. And I'm also a school librarian, so I get to see that spark of excitement. Once you find one topic and then there's another connection, and you get to kind of go down that rabbit hole of exploring and inspiring each other. That's beautiful.
Well, I'm so happy that you mentioned that you're a school librarian. I have to tip my hat. If it wasn't for the librarian at my elementary school, I'm sure I would have been invited to leave the school. I was one of those kids with extra energy, and they hadn't quite perfected that medicine that seems to help everyone these days. And so my teachers were quite inventive, probably out of necessity. I would get through my work in 2 minutes. It would take everybody else an hour and a half to get through whatever activity they gave. I would get through it in 5 minutes, and they quickly learned that the best thing to do when I was finished was to invite me to go down to the library, where I could make films and do what later, as I look back, were probably podcasts back then, that I could just go down, and I had a librarian who was incredibly supportive and would introduce me to what we considered technology then, what kids these days would look at as like hammers, but it was just wonderful. So I'm really excited. We don't give our school librarians enough credit.
Thank you. I am so glad that you had teachers and a librarian who understood the type of learner you are, honestly. And I think it's beautiful. The school that I work at is a school for diverse learners. Mm-hmm. We have, all kinds of learners. And I think just honoring kids for who they are and the gifts that they have, and really honing in on that is a beautiful thing. And yeah, I think a lot of times people have this, they don't fully understand what librarians do. We do so much. Mm-hmm. And we get to do so many different little jobs. It's just kind of the best job ever.
Yeah. And if your kid's school does not have a librarian, and I know that there are a lot of people out there who are listening thinking, what do you mean a school doesn't have a library? Trust me, there are loads and loads of schools that not only don't have a school librarian, they don't have a school library. If your kid is in one of those schools, do everything you can to get that resource. It is a vital resource, not just the books, but the space, and most importantly, that librarian. That librarian can be such an integral part of the entire school.
I absolutely agree. I really know. Deep down, I've been doing this job. I've been a school librarian at the school that I'm at for 25 years this year. And I know that the library is a safe place for lots of kids. And without that space, and without an accepting, supportive, knowledgeable librarian, some of those kids would probably be lost. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't know. They wouldn't have that space. So it is crucial.
Yeah. Well, we don't want to forget about the fact that we're here to talk about 2 books. We did a nice little dive into Bionic Beast, but we also want to make sure we have time to talk about Mac and Cheese and the Personal Space Invader. Tell us all about this book, please.
So Mac and Cheese and the Personal Space Invader is a picture book, so a little bit lower level than Bionic Beasts. And this is a fictional story, but based on my own daughter's experiences with some social skills issues, and then some of my own students who gave me their blessings to kind of share some of their experiences. So based on all of that, I created the character of Oliver, who is a fictional character, and he wants more than anything to learn how to be a good friend, and he just doesn't know how to do it. And so one day he is watching the classroom pets, which are these 2 guinea pigs, Mac and Cheese, and he sees them kind of snuggling and cuddling with each other, and he overhears his teacher, Mrs. Lopez, say, "They are the best of friends." And then Oliver thinks, now I know how to be a good friend. So he approaches his classmates trying to use these guinea pig social skills on them. He tries to cuddle with them and, nuzzle them, and they don't like it at all because he's in their personal space. So he learns the very valuable skill, with his classmates' help and his teacher's help, of personal space for humans and how it's important to give people their space. But there are times when it's appropriate to ask to come into someone else's personal space. And this was all written pre-COVID. Now personal space has this other layer of importance. So I'm hoping it'll be helpful for teachers and kids everywhere.
Let's get into that, because that was the first thing as you're talking about personal space, and that's something I think I first heard about when I was a social worker, and I'm a kind of a huggy guy, so maybe I had trouble with that, but today we are living in quite a different time, and we're living not only in a time where it's important to give folks that extra space. We're going back to school. We don't know how it's going to happen. We're expecting kindergartners, first, second, third graders to give each other their personal space without being terrified, without freaking out. Mm-hmm. Boy, that's a challenge. How are you folks planning on dealing with that? And how can we use Mac and Cheese to kind of start conversations about that?
That is such a great question. So in Mac and Cheese, I talk about using a hula hoop or using your arms to kind of gauge your own personal space bubble. And I also talk about how someone's personal space bubble differs from person to person and culture to culture. But that's kind of a good gauge, giving yourself space to spread out. So I think that's an activity that teachers and families can do, just using your arms and giving yourself that space bubble, stretching your arms out, not to hit someone or touch someone else, but just to ensure that there's space between you and the other person. At the school that I work at, we have little Velcro dots on the carpet, 6 feet apart, to give kids that visual. We also have stencils spray painted now, 6 feet apart outside. We're hoping to have some classes outside as the weather holds. So we're encouraging kids to bring their camp chairs, just to set outside as well. So just kind of all of those types of things. And then, of course, they're kids. Many of them want to touch each other, want to reach out. And so it's just going to be this reminder each time we see that we're safer keeping our distance for now.
Yeah. Such a challenge. Early on in the summertime, I've been teaching magic at a summer camp now I'm embarrassed to say that the assistant I had was probably not born the first year I worked at that camp. And she's 18 now. But we had the 5 and 6 year olds in the first week, and they were in a science lab at a high school, and each kid had their own table. And at that time, at the end of June, these kids were pretty much terrified. They wouldn't get up out of their desk. I was very surprised that 5 and 6 year olds would stay seated for 2 hours straight. And then I was bummed out because I realized that these kids were just terrified.
Yeah, I think so many adults and kids are scared right now. And I think the best thing that we can do is just be together as best we can in community when we can. And I love my school for that. Our headmaster, it's a private school, so we have a headmaster instead of a principal, and he and his team have worked all summer to set up these guidelines for how we will all return safely. And I think so many of us are just joyous to be there. Mm-hmm. So it's really my hope that as many kids as possible have those kind of communities and those safe spaces. And I think for us as parents, the more we can do that to support them and just teach them, we're going to wear our masks, we're going to wash our hands, we're going to keep our distance, we're going to do health checks at home and put some of those practices in place so that it's just kind of a commonplace thing, not a fearful thing, but this is just what we do to take care of ourselves and to take care of our community and normalize it a little bit, maybe.
Yeah. I think it's so important, I think, to be talking to kids about this and having ongoing conversation with kids, and especially ongoing conversation using really fun books like Mac and Cheese and A Personal Space Invader, because it does take away the fear. And it gives kids an opportunity so that if they are feeling afraid about this, then it's a safe way to bring it up. Now they don't have to bring it up. They don't have to go to mom and dad and go, Mom, I get something I need to talk about. It's like, hey, we're talking about mac and cheese. And hey, do you ever get worried about this kind of stuff? And it's just natural.
Absolutely. Books are so amazing for that, for bringing up the discussions, bibliotherapy types of things, mm-hmm. where you can dive into these topics and, read this book and everyone has that shared experience and then go even more deeply into the emotions around it and just kind of normalize that. And, are you guys afraid? Yeah, we're all a little afraid sometimes, but here's what we've done to keep each other safe, and just the more we talk about it, I think the more honest we are, because kids know when we're not being forthright with them, and they respect when we are honest with them. So I think that's one of the most important things.
Yeah. Hey, I want to go a little bit off topic since I have a school librarian here, and since I value school librarians so much. I know my wife who's been a special needs teacher for 33 years. She works mm-hmm. really hard to establish communication with the parents of her students, and in some cases the grandparents and the aunts and whoever else is involved. You mentioned the term bibliotherapy, and that's something we've talked about here on the show a lot, about using books to get into talking about different subjects. Is it possible for a parent out there who is looking to talk about subject X or Y to reach out directly to the school librarian to say, hey, look, I need to talk to my kids about this. My husband's involved with this. The family's going through this. What books would you recommend?
Absolutely. Yes, that is a huge part of our job. And honestly, nothing makes me happier than helping connect families, kids, teachers with the right book. So that's definitely something that they should ask their school librarian about if they have a school librarian. And if they don't, this is another reason to advocate for one. If they don't have a school librarian, I would reach out to your public librarian because they are amazing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I definitely have to give a shout out. Libraries, when I'm performing at a library, I always tell kids that you are in the most magical place, because the books that you're surrounded by, they can actually take you into the past. They're like a time machine. Or you can take another book, and that book can take you to the other side of the world, or even give you a glimpse into the future. And what more can we do other than to just make a lot of noise and say we need to fund our libraries? What else can we do to support public and also school libraries?
Oh, that's a great question. I would say, write to your lawmakers, talk with your public school officials if you're at a public school or private or charter school. Talk with them about the importance. There are all kinds of data around test scores and how a school librarian elevates test scores and grades and things like that. So there are many, many, many reasons to have a librarian on staff. And libraries currently have really diversified their offerings. They don't just offer books, and they haven't just offered books for quite some time. We do lots more, lots of online resources, lots of maker space, hands-on kinds of things, programming, as you said, So libraries themselves are doing everything they can to remain relevant. Really what libraries and librarians want to do is serve their community, help share information and make it available to everyone, and be that safe space. Yeah. So I think if people can understand what libraries want to do, it's kind of this no-brainer. Like, why would you not want to support that? And if you get what they do, then you're going to be more moved to try to support them, I think.
Yeah, just a few hours ago, I was back in the very first neighborhood that I lived in as a very, very poor social worker. And so the only neighborhood that I could live in was the very, very poor neighborhood. And I love it. It's still, the place where the new folks who are new to the country, that's where they go because they are able to live there. The library in that community is so important. It is packed to the rafters every day. It's the place where they can go and get books. They can get information. It's, in some cases, it's the only place where they can get access to the internet.
Yes.
And so, we're talking, right now we're in a time where we're talking about building a more equitable world and seeking justice for everybody. And I think a real important piece of creating that equity and making sure that we all have justice, it's being overlooked because we're not talking about funding the libraries the way we should.
I agree, absolutely. Keeping the libraries here and keeping the stories and books within them as diverse and representative as possible are two of the most important things in the world to me.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that's important to me is that we tell folks how they can connect with Jolene Gutierrez online so they can find out more about these two books. You also have an adult book, and I'm sure you're going to have more books coming in the future. So where can we connect with you?
So my website is www.jolenegutierrez.com. So it's JOLENEGUTIERREZ.com. And then you can find me on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. And my my handle on those is @WriterJolene. So WRITERJOLENE.
Awesome. We've had, this has been a fascinating conversation. I feel like we've talked about everything and we've done a deep dive into a lot of different things, and I really appreciate that. We started talking about Bionic Beast, and then we morphed into a talk about keeping kids safe during the time of COVID using Mac and Cheese and the Personal Space Invader. Both those books are written by our guest tonight, Jolene Gutierrez. Jolene, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Jed. This was amazing.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Sade Fadipe. That's the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so very wonderful. Of course, we want to start by thanking our guest, Jolene Gutierrez. Please be sure to check out Mac and Cheese and the Personal Space Invaders, and also Bionic Beast. Also want to thank my incredible team, starting with my producer, Fatima Khan. I want to thank my awesome author ambassador, Peggy Cotto. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. I want to thank Augie the doggy for taking care of security here in the studio. But most of all, I want to thank the superheroes in my life. That's you. Thank you so much for being there for your kids. Thank you so much for teaching your kids, being your kids' coaches, being your kids' everything. Thank you so very, very much. You are making the world a better place. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.